What if I told you that Zambia's former first family is hiding more than just secrets? That Edgar Lungu's missing will could decide the future of Zambia's politics, and Esther Lungu's next move might shake not only Lusaka but the entire continent? Tonight, we dive into the mystery of the missing will, Esther Lungu's uncertain exile, and the global questions haunting Zambia's leadership. This is not just about one family, it's about power, money, and Africa's future on the world stage. Stay with us, because what you're about to hear will change the way you see Zambia forever. The mystery surrounding Edgar Lungu's missing will and Esther Lungu's exile has raised new questions about Zambia's political future. In this documentary-style analysis, we explore what happened to Edgar Lungu's alleged missing will, where might Esther Lungu go next, and what does it mean for Zambia's politics, how President Hakainde Hichilema (HH) and the UPND are responding, why the world, from Africa to the UK and the US, is watching closely. From Lusaka to London, from Washington to Johannesburg, this story reveals how Zambia's internal struggles echo across Africa and beyond. Subscribe to InspirAfrica Official for more deep-dive news and political analysis from Zambia and Africa. The mystery of Edgar Lungu's missing will. The question of Edgar Lungu's missing will has sparked significant intrigue in Zambia following his death on June 5, 2025, at the age of 68 in a South African hospital. Edgar Lungu, Zambia's sixth president from 2015 to 2021, was a polarizing figure whose passing has been mired in controversy, particularly regarding his funeral arrangements and the absence of a clear will dictating his final wishes. The mystery centers on whether Lungu left a legally binding will and, if so, why it has not surfaced or been acknowledged publicly, as well as the implications of his reported instructions that his political rival, President Hakainde Hichilema, should not be involved in his funeral. Context and controversy. Lungu's family, through their spokesperson Makibi Zulu, has claimed that the former president explicitly instructed that Hichilema should not be anywhere near his body or involved in his funeral arrangements. This claim, reported widely by sources like the BBC, suggests that Lungu left some form of directive, whether written or verbal, regarding his posthumous wishes. However, no formal will has been publicly disclosed, leading to speculation about its existence, contents, or potential suppression. The absence of a documented will has fueled tensions between Lungu's family and the Zambian government, which has insisted on a state funeral in Zambia, arguing that Lungu, as a former head of state, belongs to the nation and should be buried with full honors at a designated national cemetery. Possible explanations for the missing will. Several hypotheses could explain the mystery of Lungu's will. No formal will existed. Lungu may not have drafted a legally binding will, possibly due to his sudden health decline or a belief that his verbal instructions to his family were sufficient. His health issues, including a hypoglycemic attack in 2021 and treatment for achalasia, may have limited his ability to formalize such a document. Will suppressed or contested. If a will exists, it could be held privately by the family or their legal representatives, who may be withholding it to maintain control over funeral arrangements or to protect sensitive information. Alternatively, political adversaries or government officials could be suppressing its release to avoid legitimizing Lungu's reported wish to exclude Hichilema, which could deepen political divisions. Verbal instructions misinterpreted. The family's claims about Lungu's wishes may stem from verbal statements rather than a written will, leading to disputes over their authenticity. The lack of a verifiable document has allowed both sides to interpret Lungu's intentions in ways that suit their agendas, with the family emphasizing personal wishes and the government prioritizing national protocol. Cultural and political sensitivities. In Zambia, where cultural norms around death and burial are significant, the absence of a clear will has amplified the feud. The family's insistence on a private burial in South Africa, reportedly in line with Lungu's wishes, clashes with the government's view that a state funeral is a matter of national pride and precedent. This has led to speculation that the will, if it exists, may contain politically charged directives that could exacerbate tensions. Impact of the mystery. The missing will has intensified the feud between Lungu's family and the government, turning a period of national mourning into a public spectacle. The family's distrust of the government, rooted in historical animosity between Lungu and Hichilema, has led to accusations that the state is politicizing the funeral process. For instance, the family halted the repatriation of Lungu's body from South Africa, citing deviations from agreed funeral plans, which they claim violated Lungu's wishes. Meanwhile, the government's legal actions in South African courts to repatriate the body suggest a determination to assert control, possibly to mitigate the political fallout of allowing a former president to be buried abroad. The mystery has also fueled public speculation, including unfounded rumors of occult motives, as noted by historian Sishiwa, reflecting Zambia's cultural context where belief in witchcraft is widespread. Critical perspective. The absence of a clear will highlights a broader issue of transparency and institutional trust in Zambia. If Lungu did leave a will, its non-disclosure could indicate attempts by either side to manipulate the narrative for political gain. The government's insistence on a state funeral may reflect a desire to project unity and institutional strength, but it risks alienating Lungu supporters, who see it as disrespecting his personal wishes. Conversely, the family's resistance could be interpreted as an attempt to preserve Lungu's legacy as a symbol of opposition to Hichilema's administration. Without a verifiable will, the truth remains elusive, and the controversy controversy underscores the deep political and personal divisions in Zambia. Esther Lungu's uncertain exile explained. Esther Lungu, the widow of Edgar Lungu, has found herself at the center of a complex situation following her husband's death, often described as an uncertain exile due to her prolonged stay in South Africa and the legal and political challenges she faces. This situation is intertwined with the funeral dispute, ongoing corruption charges against her, and the broader political context in Zambia. Background on Esther Lungu's situation. Esther Lungu, married to Edgar Lungu since 1986, has been a prominent figure in Zambian politics, both as the former First Lady and as a target of legal scrutiny under Hichilema's administration. Following Lungu's death in South Africa, Esther and other family members, including their daughter Tassila, have remained in South Africa, overseeing funeral arrangements and engaging in legal battles to prevent the repatriation of Lungu's body for a state funeral. The term exile may not fully capture her situation, as there is no evidence she has been formally banished from Zambia, but her extended stay in South Africa, coupled with corruption charges and the confiscation of family members' passports, has created a perception of forced or self-imposed exile. Corruption charges and legal challenges. Esther Lungu, along with her daughter Tassila, faces corruption charges in Zambia, which they deny. These charges, including allegations of vehicle theft, predate Lungu's death but have intensified the family's distrust of the Hichilema administration. The charges are part of a broader anti-corruption campaign by the UPND government, which has targeted figures associated with Lungu's Patriotic Front (PF) administration. Critics, including Lungu's family and PF supporters, argue that these charges are politically motivated to weaken the opposition and tarnish Lungu's legacy. The confiscation of passports, as reported in some media, has further restricted the family's mobility, contributing to the narrative of exile. Role in the funeral dispute. Esther Lungu has been a vocal advocate for honoring her husband's alleged wish for a private burial in South Africa, free from Hichilema's involvement. Her visible grief and active participation in legal proceedings, such as the appeal against the South African court's ruling to repatriate Lungu's body, underscore her determination to control the funeral process. The family's decision to halt the repatriation of Lungu's body twice reflects their belief that the Zambian government cannot be trusted to respect their wishes, a stance Esther has publicly supported through spokesperson Makibi Zulu. Her presence in South Africa, alongside other family members, has been portrayed as a stand against perceived government overreach, but it has also prolonged the uncertainty surrounding her return to Zambia. Why uncertain exile? The term uncertain exile likely refers to several factors. Legal limbo. The corruption charges and passport confiscation create a precarious legal situation, making it risky or impractical for Esther to return to Zambia without facing arrest or further scrutiny. Political hostility. The feud between Lungu and Hichilema, which has extended to the family, creates a hostile environment in Zambia. Lungu himself accused the Hichilema administration of harassment, including house arrest and travel restrictions, which may extend to Esther. Funeral standoff. Esther's leadership in the fight to bury Lungu in South Africa has kept her in the country, as the family awaits the outcome of their appeal against the Pretoria High Court's repatriation order. The indefinite adjournment of the case by South Africa's Constitutional Court has prolonged her stay, adding to the perception of exile. Public and cultural perception. In Zambia, where family involvement in burial arrangements is culturally significant, Esther's absence from Zambia during this period is seen as unusual and has fueled speculation about her intentions and safety. Historian Sishiwa Sishiwa has criticized the government's approach as culturally insensitive, suggesting that Esther's actions are driven by a desire to honor her husband's wishes and protect the family's dignity. Critical perspective. Esther Lungu's situation is less about traditional exile and more about a strategic retreat to South Africa to navigate legal, political, and cultural challenges. The corruption charges, while serious, have not been proven, and their timing suggests a political motive to weaken the PF and its supporters. However, Esther's decision to remain in South Africa risks alienating some Zambians who view the family's resistance to a state funeral as defiance of national tradition. The uncertain exile narrative may also be amplified by the family's public relations efforts to frame themselves as victims of Hichilema's administration, a tactic that resonates with PF supporters but deepens national divisions. The lack of clarity about her long-term plans, whether to return to Zambia or remain in South Africa, keeps her status uncertain, with implications for her legal battles and the PF's political strategy. Political tension. UPND and Zambia's shifting power. The political tension between Hakainde Hichilema, his ruling United Party for National Development, UPND, and the shifting power dynamics in Zambia is a central theme in the aftermath of Edgar Lungu's death. This tension is rooted in a decade-long rivalry between Hichilema and Lungu, compounded by the UPND's governance challenges and the opposition's fragmentation, which have reshaped Zambia's political landscape ahead of the 2026 elections. Historical rivalry. Hichilema and Lungu's animosity dates back to at least 2015, when Lungu narrowly defeated Hichilema in a presidential by-election following Michael Sata's death. The 2016 election, which Lungu won with 50.32% of the vote, was marred by allegations of rigging, and Hichilema's subsequent arrest in 2017 on treason charges for failing to yield to Lungu's motorcade cemented their enmity. Hichilema's landslide victory in 2021, defeating Lungu Lungu by nearly 1 million votes, was seen as a rejection of Lungu's economic mismanagement and perceived authoritarianism. However, Lungu remained a significant opposition figure, leading coalition efforts like the United Kwacha Alliance and Tons Alliance to challenge Hichilema in 2026 until his disqualification by the Constitutional Court. Current tensions post-Lungu's death. Lungu's death has exacerbated tensions in several ways. Funeral dispute. The feud over Lungu's funeral has become a flashpoint, with the UPND government insisting on a state funeral presided over by Hichilema, while Lungu's family and the PF demand a private burial in South Africa. This dispute has polarized public opinion, with UPND supporters celebrating court rulings favoring repatriation and PF supporters decrying government overreach. Opposition fragmentation. Lungu's death has left the PF leaderless and fragmented, with internal factions led by figures like Miles Sampa, Given Labinda, and Robert Shabinga vying for control. This weakens the opposition's ability to challenge the UPND in 2026, giving Hichilema a strategic advantage, but also raising concerns about democratic balance. Public discontent. Despite the UPND's electoral victory, public dissatisfaction is growing over economic challenges, including high living costs and perceived corruption in projects like the constituency development funds. Lungu's death has shifted focus from these issues, but the funeral controversy has highlighted Hichilema's struggle to unify the nation. Perceived persecution. The PF and Lungu's family accuse the UPND of using state institutions, such as the judiciary and police, to target opponents. The corruption charges against Esther and Lungu, as well as Lungu's pre-death claims of harassment, reinforce this narrative, deepening political divisions. UPND's governance and power shift. The UPND, under Hichilema, has sought to consolidate power by addressing Zambia's economic woes and distancing itself from Lungu's legacy of debt and alleged corruption. Hichilema's pro-Western stance and efforts to secure international investment, such as the $19 billion in MOUs with Qatar, reflect a shift toward global integration. However, critics argue that the UPND's governance has restricted civic space and failed to address economic hardship, echoing criticisms leveled against Lungu. The funeral dispute has further damaged Hichilema's image, with analysts like Sishiwa arguing that his failure to respect the family's wishes has fueled perceptions of vindictiveness. Critical perspective. The political tension reflects a broader struggle for Zambia's identity and governance model. Hichilema's UPND aims to project institutional strength and national unity, but its handling of Lungu's death risks reinforcing regional and political divides, particularly between urban and rural voters and between Bemba-speaking and Tonga-speaking communities. The opposition's fragmentation benefits the UPND in the short term, but could undermine multi-party democracy if no credible alternative emerges. The funeral dispute, while seemingly personal, is a proxy for deeper issues of power, precedent, and national sovereignty, with the UPND's insistence on control potentially setting a precedent for future state funerals that could backfire if not handled sensitively. Global spotlight. Why the UK, US, and Africa care. The controversy surrounding Edgar Lungu's death and funeral has drawn attention from the UK, US, and African nations due to Zambia's strategic importance, its democratic reputation, and the broader implications for regional stability and international relations. Zambia's strategic importance. Zambia is a key player in southern Africa, known for its copper exports, which account for 70% of its economy, and its relatively stable democratic history since independence in 1964. The country's economic challenges, including debt incurred under Lungu's administration, have made it a focal point for international creditors and investors, particularly from the West. Hichilema's pro-Western orientation, contrasted with Lungu's more balanced approach to China and other powers, has heightened interest in Zambia's political stability. The UK and US, as major donors and investors, are keen to support a stable Zambia to counterbalance Chinese influence in the region. Democratic implications. Zambia's reputation as a democratic success story in Africa makes the funeral dispute and political tensions significant. The UK and US have historically supported Zambia's democratic institutions, and the current standoff raises concerns about governance and civic freedoms under Hichilema. Lungu's allegations of harassment and the UPND's handling of the funeral have drawn criticism from international observers who see parallels with other African nations where personal rivalries undermine democratic norms. African regional dynamics. African nations, particularly South Africa, are closely watching the dispute due to its implications for interstate relations and sovereignty. South Africa's role as the host of Lungu's body and the legal battle over repatriation has placed it in a delicate position, with President Cyril Ramaphosa expressing condolences while navigating diplomatic tensions. The precedent of a former African president being buried outside their home country could affect regional norms, as noted by analysts who argue that Zambia's insistence on repatriation reflects a broader commitment to institutional continuity in post-colonial Africa. Other African leaders, such as Kenya's president, have sent condolences, signaling the continent's interest in Zambia's stability. International media coverage. The UK and US media, including outlets like the BBC and the New York Times, have covered the funeral dispute extensively, framing it as a case study of political rivalry and institutional challenges in Africa. The involvement of a South African court and the emotional scenes of Lungu's family family in Pretoria have amplified global attention, highlighting the human and political dimensions of the saga. The US's interest is further underscored by its monitoring of Zambia's political climate, as evidenced by health warnings issued after environmental incidents, indicating broader concerns about governance. Critical perspective. The global spotlight reflects a mix of genuine concern for Zambia's stability and strategic interests in its resources and geopolitical alignment. The UK and US may view Hichilema as a partner in promoting Western interests, but their support risks being seen as endorsing authoritarian tendencies if civic freedoms continue to erode. African nations, meanwhile, are wary of setting precedents that could weaken state sovereignty or embolden opposition movements. The international attention may pressure Hichilema to resolve the dispute diplomatically, but it also risks oversimplifying Zambia's complex political dynamics as a mere personal feud. What this means for Zambia's future. The events surrounding Edgar Lungu's death, the funeral dispute, and the broader political tensions have profound implications for Zambia's future, particularly as the country approaches the 2026 elections and navigates economic and social challenges. Political polarization and 2026 elections. The funeral dispute has deepened Zambia's political and regional divides, with the UPND's actions alienating PF supporters and reinforcing perceptions of bias. The opposition's fragmentation, exacerbated by Lungu's death, leaves the UPND in a strong position but risks creating a one-party dominant system, which could undermine democratic competition. The PF's leadership crisis and the failure of alliances like the TANS alliance suggest that the opposition may struggle to mount a credible challenge in 2026, potentially leading to political apathy or unrest among dissatisfied voters. Economic challenges. Zambia faces significant economic hurdles, including high debt levels inherited from Lungu's administration and ongoing issues with inflation and unemployment. The funeral controversy has distracted from these pressing issues, but public dissatisfaction could resurface if Hichilema fails to deliver on economic promises. His administration's focus on international investment, such as the Qatar MAUs, may yield long-term benefits, but short-term economic hardship could fuel discontent. Institutional precedents. The dispute over Lungu's burial sets a critical precedent for how Zambia handles the deaths of former leaders. The government's insistence on a state funeral reinforces institutional continuity, but risks being seen as heavy-handed, potentially prompting future families to resist state involvement. Conversely, allowing Lungu to be buried in South Africa could weaken national traditions and embolden regionalism, as noted by political analyst Houston Chiputa. Social and cultural impact. The prolonged standoff and accusations of occult motives have strained Zambia's social fabric, particularly in a country where cultural norms around death are sacrosanct. The government's failure to bridge the divide with Lungu's family may erode public trust, while the family's resistance risks alienating those who value national unity. Religious leaders' calls for dialogue underscore the need for reconciliation to preserve Zambia's One Zambia, One Nation ethos. Critical perspective. Zambia's future hinges on Hichilema's ability to navigate these challenges with humility and inclusivity. While the UPND's governance has brought some stability, the funeral dispute highlights the fragility of national unity. The opposition must coalesce around a new leader to maintain democratic balance, but internal divisions and legal pressures may hinder this. Internationally, Zambia's ability to assert sovereignty while maintaining ties with Western and African partners will shape its trajectory. The resolution of the funeral dispute, whether through compromise or court ruling, will signal whether Zambia can prioritize institutional resilience over personal and political grudges. The mystery of Edgar Lungu's missing will, Esther Lungu's uncertain exile, the political tensions involving Hichilema and the UPND, the global spotlight, and the implications for Zambia's future are interconnected issues that reflect the country's complex political, cultural, and economic landscape. The absence of a clear will has fueled a bitter funeral dispute, exacerbating tensions between Lungu's family and the government. Esther's prolonged stay in South Africa, driven by legal and political challenges, underscores the personal toll of this feud. The political dynamics highlight the UPND's dominance, but also the risks of a weakened opposition. International interest reflects Zambia's strategic importance, while the outcome of this saga will shape its democratic and institutional future. A resolution that balances respect for Lungu's wishes with national traditions is essential to prevent further polarization and ensure Zambia's stability.